I can see that you're making a concerted effort to draw them in and convince them of your value. Perhaps you're expending all of your energy on making those calls and sending those texts, attempting to maintain their proximity, but what if you're also trying to draw in a new client? Someone who is still unaware of the value you bring to the table has most likely been advised that in order to demonstrate your concern for them, you must continue the conversation. But let me strike you with a reality that will cause that script to change. The more you attempt to demonstrate yourself, the more you say, the more you appear. Genuinely diminishing your worth, you're boosting their ego and making them feel inferior. Control while simultaneously losing your authority. And what if you're attempting to attract a person who appears aloof, such as your partner or someone you've already gotten to know? But recently you believe that by reaching out and introducing yourself, you might make them feel less distant. Checking in will somehow repair it, but could you tell me if it has ever worked? The more you try to solve it with words and the more you explain, the farther they. The issue is your words won't be the thing that pulls them in. The majority of us are the issue with your silence. Feel that we will lose them if we don't communicate and provide an explanation. Been led to believe that regular communication will increase their appreciation for you, but the unpleasant reality is, in actuality, you become more predictable the more you explain and the more you talk. And you're offering them everything on a silver platter without making them feel valued if they don't value your presence. When you're away from the key, it's not about attempting harder, but rather about stepping back and letting the quiet do the talking. Like you're chasing someone new, but rather than constantly striking up a conversation, you allow them to coming to you. Or perhaps your lover appears aloof and hasn't sent anything yet. Another message. You remain mute, and they begin to wonder. To sense your lack of attention, and in that quiet, their ego begins to fall apart since, for the first time, they're not in charge. Silence, please. Your most effective weapon is a friend who makes you think and consider, why don't you respond? It changes the whole dynamic. Here's a quotation from Epicus, the Stoic philosopher, believed that quiet was safer than speaking, because you recover control over yourself when you stop talking, allowing them to feel superior to you. Weight of your absence and not when you're always there to explain, that's when they begin to see your value. Here's the challenge. I want you to stop reassuring or pleading for attention, telling them to stop chasing and talking and to just sit in that silence so they can feel. If you're prepared to stop boosting their ego with your remarks, hit the like button now. If you're prepared to regain your power through silence, leave a comment below with the phrase, "Silence is powerful." Is your chance to demonstrate to them and to yourself that you can be heard without speaking? However, is silence sufficient on its own? Well, people, it's not. And no wise man will just keep quiet and wait for them to notice, please. You won't just sit back and hope they come running to you, regardless of whether you're trying to bring in a new partner or rekindle a romantic interest with a seemingly distant person. It is necessary to use silence in a way that is more powerful than words. The secret is to strategically employ silence in a way that makes them sense your presence without you speaking a word. And we'll get started. It's not about mind tricks. Here's how to use silence as a powerful tool. And embracing silence is more important than using passive-aggressive strategies with confidence and intention. And we're going to explain how to achieve just that by implementing 7 timeless Stoic lessons. These concepts aren't just about keeping quiet. They're about understanding when and how to keep silent to make people notice you in a way that creates a lasting impression. Believe me, this video is going to rebuild your relationship life. These Stoic ideas will not only make them recognize your worth, but also enhance your feeling of self. You'll understand how quiet, when utilized with purpose, can turn the tables and shift the power dynamic in your advantage. So if you're ready to stop chasing and start attracting, hit the like button right now and prepare to get your mind open. Let's break down these Stoic lessons that will change the way you handle relationships. Remain tuned till the finish, because this is where the real power rests. Number 1, silence following rejection or disinterest. So guys, let us examine the first Stoic lesson, silence after rejection or disinterest. This is arguably one of the hardest things to learn, yet it's also one of the most powerful. Think about it. When you feel Rejected or detect disinterest from someone you're attracted to. Most of us have a natural tendency to act right away when we wish to make things better. Here's where you can try harder to win them over. Or, worse, explain yourself. Every word you say and every action you take to persuade them otherwise is a mistake, is only feeding their ego and accomplishing one goal, so you're diminishing your own worth. Let's examine what occurs when you encounter rejection or sense someone withdrawing. Perhaps you've been conversing with someone fresh, appear to be proceeding smoothly, but all of a sudden they are less responsive and the messages take longer. The interest appears to wane over time, and before you know it, you're experiencing the feeling disinterested. What will you do next? Most people panic, believing that perhaps I should get in touch with them once more. Perhaps I should take some action to get their attention again. This is when you should conclude the Stoic-based lesson, my friends. Philosophy holds that you can only control how you behave. You cannot control other people. The worst thing you can do when someone rejects you or pulls away is to follow up with them to find out why, as it communicates a very obvious message. Nothing can ruin your feelings, and I need your approval. Power faster than demonstrating to someone that your self-esteem depends on their approval. Stoicism teaches us that our inner strength, not what other people believe of us, is what really makes us strong. According to Marcus Aurelius, you have control over your thoughts, not external circumstances. You will find strength if you recognize this, so how do you respond to? You remain silent out of rejection or disinterest. That's right. You take no action at all. No texts, no calls, no long explanations or emotional pleadings. You simply draw back. Now I realize that quiet can feel like defeat, like you're giving up or letting them slip away. But here's the reality. Silence in this scenario is the most powerful action you might make. When you go silent after being rejected or sensing indifference, something extremely strange happens first. You stop feeding their ego. They expect you to pursue them by not giving in because they have already made up their minds, or at least they believe they have. Then the response they anticipate, you leave them feeling unsure and they begin to question why you didn't fight. More difficult to understand why you didn't plead for their attention and why you weren't attempting to justify yourself during that silence. Only their own thoughts remain, and then all of a sudden the power dynamic shifts. You've assumed command without uttering a word. But quiet isn't simply to perplex them or cause them to reconsider their choice. It's about Stoicism is all about defending your own worth and dignity. The capacity to maintain emotional stability in the face of external situations in which someone rejects you. It doesn't represent your worth. Rather, it's merely an indication of their preferences, which are subject to change. But by keeping quiet in response, you preserve your poise, your moral character, and you demonstrate your self-respect by demonstrating that your identity is not determined by their opinion of you. And after a couple of wonderful dates, they abruptly stop texting as frequently, and when they do, their energy simply differs from what most people panic and begin texting more in an attempt to understand what happened. Wrong, they might even seek for an explanation, something along the lines of, "Hey, is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" This reaction may arise from a place of genuine concern, but to the other person it reads as desperation, and desperation is the quickest way to kill attraction. Now let's consider the Stoic approach. You see their curiosity dimming. Thus you pull back, no excuses, no dramatic gestures, just silence. This move speaks volumes. It says, I respect myself enough not to chase someone who isn't interested. It communicates that you are in control of your emotions, and you're not going to let someone's temporary disinterest disrupt your sense of self. Here's the thing, when someone pulls away, it's often because they're testing you, either consciously or unconsciously. They want to see how much power they have over you, how much you're willing to fight for their attention. But when you respond with silence, you disrupt that power play. You show them that you're not going to participate in their game, and that forces them to reconsider. They start to wonder if their decision to withdraw was the right one, and that doubt is strong. And in many situations, keeping quiet doesn't just keep people away from you, it attracts them. Back in why? Because you've become the exception to the rule. While everyone else might be chasing them, trying to win them over, you're standing firm in your silence. You're showing that you're not afraid to walk away. And that confidence, that emotional resilience is incredibly attractive. It makes them wonder what they're missing, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. They start thinking about you more, and often they come back. Now, is silence a guarantee that they'll return number? But the important thing is that quiet enables you to maintain your dignity and your power, regardless of what occurs next. You're not playing by their rules, you're playing by your own. You're proving that you're not going to let someone's momentary interest or disinterest define your value, and that is the heart of Stoic strength. So the next time you feel the sting of rejection or disinterest, remember this: silence is your greatest tool. It doesn't mean you're giving up or backing down. It means you're choosing to protect your power, your self-worth, and your emotional resilience. Let them feel your absence. Let them wonder about your silence, and watch how the dynamic shifts in your favor. In the end, it's not about making them come back. It's about showing yourself that you don't need to chase anyone to feel whole. That's the real power of silence. So affirm this with me once more. Silence is powerful, and whenever you feel that pull to chase, explain, or fix things, pause. Remember that true strength doesn't come from reacting. It comes from mastering yourself and letting silence do the work. Silence protects your dignity, amplifies your value, and shifts the dynamic in your favor when they don't expect it. When they crave your response, that's allow them to feel the weight of your absence when silence speaks loudly. And allow them to see how valuable you are in that second silence. Talk when they're anticipating a response. Let's discuss letting. One of the most effective things you can do in a situation where someone is expecting a response is to speak quietly. Relationship: imagine a situation where you're talking to someone. Maybe they've said something hurtful or they're trying to get a rise out of you. They expect you to respond, maybe to defend yourself, apologize, or even argue back. But instead, you do the opposite. You stay silent. Why is this so effective? Because people are conditioned to expect a reaction when they push your buttons. They're looking for emotional validation. They want to know that they can control your feelings, that their words or actions affect you. But when you respond with silence, you take away their power. You show them that you are in control of your emotions, not them. This silence speaks louder than any comeback ever could. It says, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me react. Here's a common example. You're in a heated argument with someone. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's someone you're interested in. They throw out a hurtful comment, something meant to trigger an emotional response. Most people would immediately react either by defending themselves or attacking back. But instead of getting drawn into the emotional chaos, you choose silence. You pause, you breathe, and you let the moment pass without a word. This silence forces them to confront their own behavior. It leaves them wondering why you did respond. It creates discomfort because they can no longer predict or control your emotions in that moment of silence. You've shifted the power dynamic. You've shown that you're not easily shaken, that you won't be manipulated into reacting emotionally. Silence also allows space for reflection when you don't respond. It gives the other person time to think about what they said or did. They might realize that they were out of line, that their words were hurtful, or that their actions were unnecessary. Silence forces them to sit with the discomfort of their own behavior, and often it leads them to reconsider their actions without you having to say a word. In Stoicism, this is a key principle: mastering your reactions by not responding impulsively. By choosing silence over emotional outbursts, you maintain control over yourself. You don't let the situation control you. And this is incredibly powerful, especially in relationships. It shows maturity, strength, and self-respect. Next time someone tries to provoke a reaction from you, remember this: silence is your strongest response when they're expecting you to lash out, defend yourself, or engage in an argument. Choose silence instead. Let them wonder, let them reflect, and let your silence speak for you. That's where your power truly lies. Number 3, use silence to make them miss you. Let's talk about how to use silence to make them miss you. One of the most powerful moves in any relationship, whether you're just starting to connect or trying to reignite a spark with someone who seems distant. Silence, when used strategically, can shift the dynamics completely. It's the opposite of chasing. It's the opposite of over-communicating, and it allows space for them to realize what your presence actually means. Here's the reality when you're constantly available. Always talking, texting, and showing up. They start to take you for granted. You're always there, so there's no urgency or need to miss you. They know they can count on your attention whenever they want it, but when you pull back, when you let silence fill the gaps where your voice or attention once was, that's when they start to notice something is different. That's when they begin to feel your absence, and it leaves a void they can't ignore. Think about a time when you've missed someone. It's not because they were constantly in your face, always seeking your attention. It's because there was space for you to reflect on what they brought into your life when they weren't there. You realize what you were missing. The same principle applies. Here, silence gives them the space to feel the absence of your presence and wonder why you're not chasing them like everyone else. Let's say you've been talking to someone for a while, but things have started to cool off. Maybe they're not responding as quickly, or maybe the excitement is fading. Most people would respond by texting more, calling more, or asking what's wrong. But here's where silence becomes your most valuable tool. Instead of trying harder, you pull back. You stop initiating conversations, you let silence do the talking. At first, it might feel strange, like you're doing nothing when you should be doing something. But that's the beauty of silence. It's not passive, it's a deliberate move. You're giving them the space to miss you, to realize that your attention isn't something they can just expect or take for granted. They start to notice the lack of your texts, the absence of your calls, and it creates a sense of curiosity and even longing. Why aren't they reaching out? Did I do something wrong? Have they moved on? These thoughts start to fill the silence you've left behind. Silence isn't just about making them miss you. It's about reestablishing your value when you're constantly available. You're signaling that your time and attention are easily accessible, and that reduces your perceived value. But when you become less available, when your presence becomes something they have to earn or work for you, remind them of your worth. They begin to crave the attention that you're no longer giving living so freely, and that's when the tables start to turn. Remember, silence creates tension, and tension creates attraction in a world where everyone is constantly trying to be heard. The person who knows when to be silent stands out. It's a form of power, of control, and of mystery. It shows that you're not needy, that you don't depend on their attention for validation, and that you have the emotional strength to pull back when necessary. In Stoic philosophy, we learn that desire should not drive our actions. Self-control should. When you use silence effectively, you're demonstrating a level of self-control that most people lack. You're showing that you don't need to chase after their attention because you're confident enough to let them come to you. So the next time you feel like you need to do something to win them over, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let silence work its magic. Let them miss you. Let them feel the absence of your presence, and in that space, they'll start to realize your true value. Number 4, silence when setting boundaries. Let's dive into silence when setting boundaries, a crucial and often overlooked tool in relationships. Setting boundaries is essential for maintaining respect and balance in any relationship, whether you're just starting out or have been together for years. But here's where most people get it wrong. They have music over-explained. Blow, but true power comes when you set your boundary clearly and then let silence do the rest. Let's say you're in a situation where someone is pushing you past your comfort zone. Maybe they're asking too much of your time, energy, or emotional bandwidth. You've told them once before where your limits are, but they keep testing those boundaries. Most people would feel the need to explain why they're saying no, or why they can't give more. They'd go into long-winded explanations, hoping to make the other person understand. But here's the truth: the more you explain, the more you weaken your position. When you set a boundary, it doesn't require an explanation. In fact, explaining your boundary often signals to the other person that your boundary is negotiable, that there's room for discussion or compromise. But when you set your boundary firmly and follow it up with silence, you send a clear, unshakable message. This is where I stand, and there's no need to justify it. For example, let's say someone keeps asking you to do something that drains your energy. Maybe it's a favor they're constantly requesting, or they expect more attention than you're able to give. Instead of saying, "I'm really tired, I have so much going on, I wish I could help," but simply say, "I'm not available for that period." No need for further justification, and then silence this. Silence reinforces your boundary. It communicates that you are confident in your decision and there's no room for negotiation. The other person will feel the weight of that silence and will be forced to respect the boundary you've set. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to explaining yourself or trying to make others feel better about your decisions. But in reality, this silence after setting a boundary is a demonstration of self-respect and emotional maturity. Another critical element of silence when setting boundaries is that it allows the other person to process your decision. If you flood the conversation with explanations, they may focus on your reasons, looking for loopholes or ways to convince you to change your mind. But when you remain silent after stating your boundary, they're left to reflect on the boundary itself. It leaves no room for debate in Stoic philosophy. We learn that maintaining control over our responses is key to preserving inner peace. Silence in this case is about holding firm to your values without the need for external validation. You're not trying to persuade or seek approval for your decision. You're simply standing your ground. So next time you need to set a boundary, state it clearly, and then let the silence speak for itself. Let them feel the firmness of your stance and the strength of your self-respect. Silence in this context is your greatest ally. Number 5. Silence as a tool of mystery. Silence is one of the most powerful tools. When it comes to creating mystery in a relationship, people are naturally drawn to what they don't fully understand. And silence is the perfect way to cultivate that sense of intrigue. When you use silence as a tool of mystery, you aren't just withholding words. You're creating an air of unpredictability that leaves them wanting more. Think about it in the early stages of getting to know someone. If you're constantly sharing every detail about your life, telling them everything you think, feel, and plan, you're leaving nothing to the imagination. The excitement fades because there's no curiosity left when you're too open too soon. You lose the element of surprise, but when you hold back, when you allow silence to fill certain spaces, it leaves them wondering about you, about your thoughts, your feelings, and what's going on in your mind. This isn't about playing games, it's about keeping some things for yourself. Silence creates gaps that make them curious to learn more. They'll start asking themselves questions like, why haven't they mentioned that? What are they thinking? What's next? It's this intrigue that keeps people invested and interested in you. You become someone they can't fully figure out. And that's captivating. Another way silence creates mystery is by not always being available when you're not constantly responding right away. When you leave some conversations hanging, it makes them think, it gives them space to wonder, to anticipate your next move. And that anticipation builds tension, tension that fuels attraction. Stoicism teaches us to be deliberate with our actions and words. Sometimes saying less is more powerful fuel than filling every moment with chatter by holding back. You maintain control over what others know about you, and you leave them wanting more. So the next time you feel the urge to explain everything or fill every silence, remember this: mystery is magnetic. Let your silence speak for itself and watch how it draws them closer, keeping them curious and engaged. Number 6, use still to break patterns. Let's talk about using silence to break patterns. One of the most underrated yet effective ways to shift dynamics in a relationship. Relationships, whether new or long-term, often fall into predictable patterns. These can be anything from repeated arguments, emotional outbursts, or even how you interact with each other daily. When things get stuck in these loops, the relationship becomes stagnant and sometimes toxic. That's where the power of silence comes in. It can disrupt these patterns and completely reset the energy between you and the other person. Picture this: you're in a relationship, and every time a disagreement comes up, the same argument unfolds. Maybe they criticize something, and you immediately get defensive, or perhaps you're always the one apologizing and trying to smooth things over, even when it's not your fault. You both know exactly how it's going to play out, and it leaves you both exhausted and resentful. This cycle is toxic, and every time you react in the same way, you're reinforcing it. But what if you did something different? What if instead of reacting, you stayed silent? In Stoic philosophy, one of the greatest teachings is about mastering your reactions. When you refuse to react in the way they expect you, instantly break the cycle. If they're used to you always defending yourself or escalating the argument, your silence will throw them off balance, It forces them to pause to question the familiar pattern, and often it will stop. The argument in its tracks silence in this moment becomes a tool of control, not in a manipulative way, but in a way that protects your peace and prevents the situation from escalating by choosing silence. You aren't avoiding the issue. You're giving it space to cool down, space for reflection, and space to prevent the conversation from spiraling into something destructive. When you remain silent instead of reacting, it forces the other person to face their own behavior without your emotional involvement. They're no longer fueled by your response, and often they'll be left to reflect on their actions without the usual back and forth. Another way silence can break patterns is in daily communication. If you're always the one initiating conversations, keeping things moving, or being the emotional support, it can create an unhealthy imbalance by pulling back and allowing silence to settle in. You're forcing the other person to step up and meet you halfway. They'll notice when you're not doing all the work, and that can shift the dynamic toward more equality and mutual effort. Breaking these patterns with silence doesn't mean avoiding communication or ignoring problems. It means stepping back to disrupt unhealthy cycles and allowing both parties to reflect in this space. Healthier communication can emerge the tension created by silence. Isn't negative, it's productive. It stops the habitual responses and opens the door to new ways of interacting. So next time you feel stuck in a toxic loop or find yourself in a heated argument, try something different. Use silence to break the pattern, to give space for reflection, and to regain control over your emotional reactions. Silence can be the reset button that shifts the relationship ship from a place of conflict or imbalance to a place of peace and understanding. Number 7, the silence of emotional control. Let's talk about the silence of emotional control. One of the most powerful tools you can develop in any relationship. Emotional control is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, and it's what separates those who are constantly reactive from those who command respect in relationships. The person who can master their emotions, who can remain calm, composed, and silent in the face of chaos, holds incredible power. Imagine this: you're in the middle of a heated situation. Maybe your partner or the person you're interested in says something hurtful or challenges you in a way that provokes an emotional response. Most people, when faced with this kind of emotional pressure act, immediately they lash out, defend themselves, or try to win the argument. But that's exactly what the other person expects, and it gives them control over your emotions. When you react impulsively, you're handing over your emotional power to them. Now picture the opposite. You stay silent, you don't react. You don't immediately jump in to defend yourself or to argue. Instead, you take a breath and let the moment pass without a word. That silence shows emotional control. It shows that you're not easily provoked, that you're not ruled by your emotions, and that you're able to maintain composure even in intense situations. This silence sends a powerful message. You can't be shaken when you master emotional control through silence. You create an environment where they can no longer manipulate or control the situation. The other person is left in their own emotional space, and without your emotional reaction fueling the fire, they're forced to confront their own behavior. Silence in this context isn't about avoiding the issue. It's about maintaining your power and not allowing the situation to dictate your actions. One of the core teachings of Stoicism is that we are only responsible for our own actions, and actions, not the actions of others. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind. Not outside events realize this, and you will find strength." This is exactly what emotional control through silence offers. You're not trying to control the other person, but you are controlling how you respond to them. And in relationships, this level of control is magnetic because it shows confidence and self-respect. When you don't react to provocations, when you hold your ground in silence, it forces the other person to realize that they don't have the power to upset you. This can be incredibly unsettling for someone who is used to provoking emotional responses from others. It also sets a boundary. You won't be dragged into emotional games, and you won't allow anyone to dictate how you feel. The silence of emotional control also gives you time to think. Instead of reacting impulsively, you can reflect on the situation and choose your next steps carefully. You're able to assess whether the issue is even worth addressing or if silence is the best course of action. This calm, measured approach keeps you in control of your emotions and, by extension, the relationship dynamic in the end. The silence of emotional control isn't about shutting down or avoiding communication. It's about showing that you're in charge of your own emotional state and that no one can pull you into a reaction unless you allow it. This kind of control is deeply attractive because it shows maturity, strength, and stability qualities that are essential in building a strong, healthy relationship. So the next time you feel the urge to react emotionally, remember this silence can be your greatest ally. It's not a sign of weakness. It's the ultimate display of strength and emotional mastery. Silence is more than just the absence of words. It's a powerful tool that can shift the dynamics of any relationship. Whether you're trying to attract someone new or regain control in a distant relationship, mastering silence allows you to communicate strength, mystery, and emotional control. It's time to stop reacting and start using silence strategically to enhance your presence. If you're ready to take control of your relationships, hit the like button and drop a comment below with the phrase, "I am silent strength," to affirm your commitment to mastering this powerful tool. Let's own our power together.